Right. Okay. Right. So let's share some ideas from the Ramban. As previous weeks, we're following the Ramban through Sefer Bereishis. So a few relatively smaller ideas in this week's parsha tried to take out. The first one is in Perek Chof Gimel Pasuk Yud. The Ramban brings on the definite on what Ma'ara Samachpela was. First, he brings Rashi. We're familiar with the different interpretations of what that word means, machpela, meaning double. He brings Rashi. If you can see it, it's on. Yeah, can you see it? It's on Perek Pasuk Yud. Yeah, Pasuk Yud. There's yeah, that's right. Pasuk Yud. He says first he brings Rashi, Bias V'Aliyah Al Gabov, that it was a two-story cave or burial place, what that became, or the doubled in pairs, as we know, the pairs who were buried there. And the Ramban disagrees. He says, it says the field of Ephraim, which was in Machpelah. That's what it says later on in Pasuk Yud Zayin. So it was Ephraim's field in Machpelah. It's the name of the place in which the field was. You don't need to look for a name or a reason for a place name. So again, you'd be interested. Again, it's interesting to highlight the difference, right? Sometimes the Ramban, as we know, often quotes Rashi, and here he disagrees with Rashi in Pshat. He says that Rashi says that it's the name of the cave was called this because it was a double-story cave. He says the problem is it says the field of Ephraim, which was in Machpelah, so it's obviously a place name. He says rather than the name of the cave. There's another explanation in Bereishis Rabbah that says that Hashem bent over the height of Adam Rishon. Again, we're familiar with that, so he could fit inside the cave, and that's the Machpelah Kofal, meaning to double bend over. There, according to the Chazal, the whole place had always been called that. They didn't know the reason because Ephron sold him basically everything, the whole field, right? According to his understanding, that there was no kever there. So the Ramban is just highlighting that the historic burial place of Adam, which had preceded this debate and this sale, was presumably something which Ephron was not aware of. And it was just a name that they had associated with that place. They always know, this is always known as Beis Machpelah. And the reason was because Adam had been buried there many years before. The Ramban says something very interesting. He says that Avram only sought to buy the place of the cave, right? That was the end of the field. That's what he wanted. And the rest of the field be left for Ephron. Either by way of Musa, sort of telling him off in a way, or guile, deceit. That he should give him the field, right? So if you see if you see the Ramban is picking up here on the difference in the request and the response. In Pasuk Tes it says, give me the cave, right? That's at the edge of the field. That's what he asked for, right? Ephron is sitting there and he answers and he says, no, what's going on? No, you've got to have the field. I've given you the field. And the cave, which is within it, right? It's not possible for someone as honorable as yourself that you're going to have the cave for a kever, and the field surrounding it belongs to someone else. Avram was happy with this idea, and therefore he purchased the whole thing for the money which he had, which he mentioned for him, the kesef mole. We know the whole debate about and the distinction between the way the money was offered and what he actually gave in the end, what he actually required in the end. But the point is that the Ramban is pointing out here that you notice is this very subtle change between, or not so subtle, between the request and the response. There is a response from Ephron where he intends to make sure that he buys the field as well. And perhaps that's also linked to what results at the end, where Ephraim wishes to be in a position where Avraham departs from a substantial amount of money, which is really Ephron's ultimate aim, right? As the phrase is, what is something small between friends? As he says, right? What is this? A small amount of money between friends. Of course, it is not so small. Now, the Ramban says later on, if you go now to Perek Chof Gimel Pasuk Yotes, so the first bit of the Ramban, he talks about the value of the value of the field, what it was worth. And then he says, he's going to go through into the sorry, he says, it talks in Pasuk, it says that Avraham buries Sarah, his wife, in the cave, in Chevron, Be'eretz Canaan. So the Ramban here brings a few points. Look at the beginning of the Ramban in Pasuk Yotes. Why is it that the Torah right at the end lists the whole thing? The cave of Machpelah, Mamre, Chevron, Eretz Canaan, right? The whole list, exactly, geolocating it, right, to where it is. The whole parsha has listed the Bnei Ches and Ephraim, the Hittite. Torah wants to emphasize that this place was part of Eretz Yisrael. And therefore it says also the same at the beginning. This is the beginning of the parsha. It says there was a Kiras Arba, which is Chevron, in Eretz Canaan. Same thing, right? To tell us that the tzaddikus, in other words, Sarah, died in Eretz Yisrael and she was buried there. So there's an emphasis at the end that the location, the place of her burial, was in Eretz Yisrael, in the sense that the Ramban links it to her righteousness. This emphasis at the beginning and the end of the parsha of the location is meant to emphasize that she had the merit of passing away in Eretz Canaan and being buried in Eretz Yisrael. Perhaps a hint to that significance of being buried in Eretz Yisrael, which of course is re-emphasized at the end of Sefer Bereishis, with Yaakov wishing to return to Eretz Canaan. So that's why it's emphasized in this way. And then he goes on to say, we don't have to go through the next paragraph inside, but basically he goes on to say that the idea of the Pesukim is, he says that I believe the idea of the Pesukim is to emphasize that it wasn't Eretz Plishtim. It wasn't Eretz Plishtim. We know Avraham spent a long time living in Eretz Plishtim in various times, and therefore it wants to mention that this was not part of that area. Now look at then he says, can you see the next paragraph? What is the purpose of this parsha? That means to say the whole of the first parsha of Chaye Sarah, and the Meforshim have many different ideas as to why it is that this parsha is spelled out in such detail in the Torah. And the Ramban says the following: this parsha is written Hashem im Avram. It's to tell us the kindness of Hashem with Avram. That is the purpose. That is the function. He was a Nasi Elokim, Prince of Hashem, in a land where he had come to sojourn, and he was there as a solitary individual at that time. He was basically the only one. And yet they all called him my master. It's an amazing thing. This was a nomadic person who had moved around the land many times, right? And they called him my master. He didn't tell them that that's what he was. This is part of the kindness of Hashem. The Torah is emphasizing through this account that the promise that he had received right at the beginning of Lech Lecha, that Hashem says, I will make your name great, I will make you famous, everyone will speak about you, and you will be for a blessing. This was fulfilled in him. It's an interesting take on this parsha, because you look at the way they describe him, the way they refer to him, the respect, the deference, that is a fulfillment of that bracha. And he said that's why it emphasizes, because it's the kindness of Hashem. Be'ishtei Mason, his wife, died v'nikra b'nachlas Hashem, and she was buried in the inheritance of Hashem. So that's the first reason, says the Ramban, that this parsha is written in detail to show us the fulfillment of Hashem's promise to Abraham that your name will become great, will be magnified. Furthermore, he says, the Torah wants to tell us mokum kavura sa'avos, the place of the burial of the Avos, to tell us and to teach us that we are obligated to honor the place of burial of our of the Avos of Aseinu HaKadoshim. I think that's really kind of a third reason in a way. Chazal say that this is one of the tests of Avram, right? There are those who say this is one of the tests, the final test perhaps, that he wanted to find a place and yet was not able to until he had to purchase it, right? That he had devoted everything in his life in order to achieve Eretz Yisrael, and yet his wife passes away and he can't find a place to bury him, which ostensibly should mean he would sort of collapse, almost like the failure of the vision or the mission. You can't even find that, and yet he's able to do so, right? So that's I think really even a third reason. But the second reason the Ramban gives is that the Torah wants to explain to us and inculcate within us the respect that we need for the Mokum Kvuras of Aseinu HaKadoshim, for our ancestors. And I think it's possible to understand this Ramban on two levels. The second explanation. The first one is about the kindness of Hashem. Avram is great. But the second one, where he says the Torah wants us to understand the honor that we need to give to the place of the burial of the Avos, you can understand, I think, on two levels. The simple explanation is it means literally to honor the place that they are buried, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, right? But perhaps you can also learn and understand, and I'm sure this is developed by others as well, the Mefarshim, is that it teaches us the concept of Kovod HaMeis. It teaches us the concept of the honor due to a Mokum Kavura, and what that means, right? What that means is that it's deep. There's a deep significance that exists in the context of how we treat those who have passed away, and that's not something which can be taken for granted, because not everyone understands that, right? That not all cultures, lahavdil, understand that this is something essential, that the Mokum Kvura, the place of Kvura, is sanctified ground, that there is a permanence to it, right? That it's a place of deep significance, of spiritual significance. And therefore he says that's why this Parsha is spelt out in this detail, to help inculcate that within us, because this is the first of the Jewish people, so to speak, who passes away, and therefore it's built in from this very moment. And that's one of the reasons, that's what the Ramban is saying. Is saying here. Okay. Fine. I mean, the final point the Ramban says in this piece is he doesn't understand the Ibn Ezra's approach. That Ibn Ezra says that it's to tell them it's to teach the Mila of Eretz Yisrael for the Chaim and the Mesim, the significance of Eretz Yisrael both for those who are alive and for those who have passed away. And he says, and he says. To be fulfilled the word of Hashem, that it should be an inheritance for him. Okay, and he says that that's not, he doesn't understand why that should be specifically the Mila of this land, that he didn't take someone else to bury her. The word of Hashem was on the whole land, right, and it was actually fulfilled really with his descendants rather than Avram himself. So he doesn't, the idea that in terms of the inheritance itself, I think he's struggling with the fact that is the fact that he didn't take her to another place. This was where she was supposed to be buried. And actually the fulfillment on the whole land, which was the promise, was only actually fulfilled in his descendants. On Posuk Chof, the next Posuk really, Chof, well, whatever, next Ramban, Chof Dalad Posuk Aleph, the Ramban says, which one is it? 1 second. Yeah. So the Ramban here says, just go from the beginning of the next Ramban. Avram Zakein Bo Bayom. So the beginning of the introduction to the second part of the parsha, which tells, of course, the finding of a wife for Yitzchak. Chazar Kosav Lo Makein. Says the Ramban, the Torah tells us this again. Avram Zakein Bo Bayomim. That Avram was elderly and he had arrived in days. To tell us the reason that on account of this, he made his Evid make a shvua. V'omar, and he said, Ki roa atzmai zokin. The Torah says, Ki roa atzmai zokin ma'od. He saw himself as a very elderly man. V'choshav beliboy, and he thought in his heart, she'im yishlach la'eretz moladoto, that if he sends him to his birthplace, he might not survive. He was worried he might pass away before the shliach, the Eved, comes back. So therefore he made him make a shvua that Yitzchak should follow his advice. Because this Eved, Eliezer, was in charge. They shouldn't take a wife from the descendants of Canaan, from the daughters of Canaan. In other words, he was confident that Yitzchak would follow what Eliezer had promised. By making Eliezer make this promise, he knew that Eliezer was in charge of the household, and therefore Yitzchak, if he passed away, Yitzchak would follow that, because that's what Eliezer had been told to do, and he was in charge, basically, of the household, right? There is another approach that is brought in the I think it might be in the Kliyaka, but it's another approach that's brought into this, because the question the Ramban is asking here basically is, we've already been told this concept of Bo Bayomim, right? Bo Bayomim has appeared already. But Avram Zaken in Bo'im Bayomim is at the beginning of Parashas Vayera, when they are told they're going to have a child. And it's repeated again here. Avram Zaken Bo Bayomim. So that's why he has this question: why did the Torah repeat it in this sense, in this idea? So an idea which I said at the Levaya from Eliot's father was that there is one of the key ideas that the Torah is trying to convey here is the idea that these are two milestones in Avraham Avinu's life. What is emphasized in the first instance is the relationship between Avram and Sarah. Avram and Sarah is a Canaan boy and Bayomim. The relationship between them, right, which was critical for the mission. And then what is emphasized here, the Bo Bayomim, is the notion of he has to now find a wife for Yitzchak. In other words, there should be a continuity. So in other words, the idea of entering days and achieving days is emphasized specifically at those particular moments when the notion of continuity is being emphasized to Avraham Avinu, in which I think you can understand, but perhaps that in the world and Avraham Avinu's global effect on everything he does and the mission in life and everything else, where it was being able to have confidence in the legacy and what would be the continuity of that, which remained the central part of everything. And that's why you have this. They were Bo Bayomim. They had arrived in days. You know, I think it's understanding it's something along those lines, because when they were focused on that mission. So if you skip the next paragraph, he brings a medrash, but then after that it says Berachas Avram Bakol. He says, he says Berachas Avram Bakol. What does it mean that Avram was blessed with everything? It says Ba'osha Nechosim V'Kovod Erech Yomim Ubonim V'Zos Kol Chemdas Ha'Adam. He brings the Ibn Ezra, who says that Avram was blessed with everything. He had wealth and property and honor and Erech Yomim and length of days. He was an elderly man and he had children now. V'Zos Kol Chemdas Ha'Adam. That's the desire of the person. That's what they wish to achieve. V'Hiskar Kosev Zeh Lomar Ki Sholem Bakol. But Avram Avinu was complete in everything. Lo Choser Davar. He lacked nothing. Zulosi, except Sheyira Bonim Libnoi, children for his son, Sheyinchulu Ma'alosei Ukvoidoi, who would inherit the achievements that he had made. In other words, the mila, the level, the spiritual level he had, Ukvoidoi, and the honor which he had achieved in his life. Velochenis Avelozeh, and that's why he desired it. So why does the Torah say, says the Ramban, right? Based on the understanding, he's explaining the Ibn Ezra, right? Why does the Torah say Avram was Bo'ayim Bashem Beraches Avram Bakol? Because Avram had achieved so much. But the most important thing, as similar to what we said before, was that there should be a way of handing that on. It wasn't something he wanted for himself. It wasn't something he wanted to retain and say, this stops with me. This is something he wanted to make sure that he would hand on to the next generation. Now, if you skip now to Perek Chov Daled Posuk Tes Zayin. Yeah.
It's interesting, it says here that one of the prophets was that he had born in Thor. And then so having Yitzchak and Yishmael was considered a prophet?
I'm not sure if that's what it means here. In the sense that it says Kibi Yitzchak Yikari Lechazara, right? Yitzchak was the descendant of Avram. And there's a whole discussion about the difference between Yitzchak and Yishmael and what sense Yishmael may be considered Avram's child in that way. I think it's possible to understand this Ibn Ezra, that it means the blessing of children,
including grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
which, yeah, it could be that as well. But even without that, just to say the blessing of children, which in the context of Avram is the son he has. Is Yitzchak.
I guess at this point, you haven't had grandchildren yet, have you?
Yeah, that's true. And he's looking ahead to that, and that's what he would like to achieve. But the point about it is that bonim here could be understood, I think, as a general reference to children, even though with him it's a child. That makes sense. It's the key. It's the key. We'll come back though if we hopefully have time. Just to hear a little bit about Yishmael. The Ramban says something about Yishmael at the end of the parsha, which is very, very interesting. So Perek of Dalet Posuk Tes Zayin. A second. No, not Chof Dalet Tes Zayin. Chof Hey. Must be Chof Hey. After the parsha. No, it can't be that far. No, we'll get there. Don't worry. V'yeh Yitzchak. What I'm looking for is the pasuk of V'yeh Yitzchak. Yeah, that's it. Pasuk, yeah, the very last pasuk in Perek Chof Dalet, Samach Zayin. Most of this parsha is one Perek. By V'yeh Yitzchak Oila Sarah Imai, Yitzchak brings Rivka into the tent of Sarah, his mother. He marries Rivka, and she's a wife to him. And he loved her. And Yitzchak is then comforted after his mother. Skip the first few words in the Ramban. Samach Zayin. The Tama Kosov. The reason of the posuk is, in other words, the message of the posuk is, Ramban says something very interesting. He almost turns the posuk around. He says, do you know what the Torah is trying to tell us here? The deep respect that Yitzchak had for his mother. If one Sarah was died, he refused to erect her tent. No other woman can enter the tent of such a great woman, such a great person, right? So there was a constant sense of the honor, the kavod that Yitzchak showed to his mother. And that's what it means that now Yitzchak brings her into his mother's tent. Because and then when he saw Rivka and she was worthy of that, he brings her into the tent, and that's why he marries her. And that's what it means. And he loved her and he was comforted. And one understands that the whole emphasis of this posuk is about the relationship and the connection that Yitzchak had with his mother, right? The Yitzchak had with his mother, with Sarah. That's what the Torah is emphasizing. And it was, he couldn't find any comfort after his mother had passed away. And the only thing that brought him comfort was the marriage he enters into, and that brings him comfort. That love of Rivka brings him comfort from the mourning over his mother. He says, otherwise, how do you understand why it is that the Torah says, what's the purpose of telling us that Yitzchak loved Rivka? We don't think of it. There's a message. Every single detail and dot and letter, there's a reason, there's a message. Why are we being told that Yitzchak had that relationship with Rivka? And the answer is because it's explaining to us the deep respect and kavod, according to the Ramban, that Yitzchak had for his mother, and that this was the way he was able to be comforted from that. And Perek Chofei Posuk Ches, I said these are just really sort of brief ideas. Perek Chofei Posuk Ches, it says again, an emphasis on what Avram Avinu had achieved. The Posuk says, Vayigva Vayomas Avram b'seiva tova. Avram expired, he passed away, b'seiva tova in old age, zokein v'sovea. He was elderly and sated. Vayosef alamov, and he was gathered into his people. Says the Ramban, zokein v'sovea, shira kol mishalos liboy, v'sova kol tova. He saw all of the desires of his heart fulfilled, v'sova kol tova, and he absorbed all goodness. V'cheinu sva yomim, shesova nafshe b'yomim. His soul was sated in days. And he didn't desire he didn't desire that the days should bring anything new to him. He'd achieved everything he was supposed to achieve and wanted to achieve. Okay, in Shom V'David, it says Yomas B'Seiva Tova. He died in B'Seiva Tova with good old age, right? B'Seiva Tova Sva Yomim V'Osha V'Chovod. Sated of days V'Osha V'Chovod, with wealth and honor. V'Hu Sipur Chasti Hashem Tzadikim. This is the description of the kindness of Hashem with tzaddikim, and in the great achievement, a midah that they have, that they don't desire extra things. You've given him what he wants. Other people are not like that. Other people, we say, well, loves money, wants more. The Medrash says, no person passing this world without half of his desires being fulfilled. Yesh b'yodam one, he wants more, 100, he wants 200. 200, you want 400. So what is the Ramban telling us? Ramban is saying that when the Torah describes Avraham Avinu as dying, b'seiva tova, in a good old age, and he is sated, it doesn't mean that Avraham Avinu has achieved everything there is to achieve in life. And this parallels the one we said before, when he quotes the Ibn Ezra, that Avraham Avinu has got covered, and there clearly would maybe have been more things that Avraham Avinu would have wanted in life. But he was sated because he had a mission, and that mission he had fulfilled. I saw a beautiful idea from Rabbi Sachs, the Chaim Levracha, she mentioned the Torah from him, this Yurtzai just passed, that in a quote, but Rashi emphasizes, I think he says that with, it's really from this Ramban as well, that I think he says that with at the beginning with Sarah, when Sarah dies, what does it say? It says, Shnei Chaye Sarah, Kulon Shovin Latova. They were all good, all equal in goodness. Just stop for a second and think about Sarah Imeinu's life, and ask yourself what Rashi means by saying Kulon Shovin Latova. Right? She had a lot of sorrows, right? Not being able to have children until later on. Hagar, Yishmael, right? Avimelech and Paray, and Kulon Shovin Latova. It was all wonderful. Yeah. And the same thing with Avraham Avinu. Look at the way the Ramban is describing Avraham Avinu's life. The way the Ramban describes it, it was nothing. It was all incredible. Everything he wanted was fulfilled, and there was nothing else he needed or wanted. He had all these tests and trials and difficulties, and even Eretz Yisrael, which was promised to him, he hardly saw any of it as in his own inheritance. So Rasak says that the point is that he quotes Nietzsche actually, Kedarko, that in these things, that he who has a why in life can bear almost any how. Right? If you live for a mission and you live for a purpose, then that means you can live with any sort of anything that comes your way. You're not living for the hows. You're not living for the bits and pieces. How will I manage with this, and how will I do this, and whatever, and how will I get there, and the worries, and everything else. You live because you've got the why. All you've got is the why. This is why I exist. And that's, I think, what the Ramban here means. That he was Zakin v'Savea. He was elderly, he was sated, because since his life was about the mission, then all of the things he didn't achieve in his life were irrelevant, because the mission was achieved, and that's what he was focused on. A beautiful, beautiful idea, an incredibly important one. And finally, on Yishmael, the last idea, where the Ramban really emphasizes the tshuva of Yishmael. It's an amazing thing, right? It's amazing. Rashi also brings this. The Ramban says on Pasuk Yudzayin, Eile Shnei Chaye Yishmael Hakorav B'derech HaPshat. This is the Pshat. Ki Hakosav Yisape B'vnei HaTzadikim Toldosom Mispar Chayim. Why are we told the generation of Yishmael? Because the Torah tells us the children of the righteous and their generations and the children of the tzaddikim should be blessed. But it doesn't say this. Okay, he doesn't talk about Esav would live longer, and he was already finished. We'd already finished the story with Yaakov. Okay.
The point is because he separates up
Here as well.
Yes, with Yishmael.
Yeah.
And that's the point that he makes. That it's got the same because Yishmael died.
Yeah, although interestingly, Rashi doesn't.
Chaim says that. And Rashi also does.
I don't think Rashi says on Yishmael though, right?
Well, it says in it, because it says by Ikbar, and it says by Ikbar with Sadiq matching. That's what I was just going to look up before.
Right.
Because it actually says, Russia actually.
Yeah. That's right. Vehicles of tzaddikim, Rashi brings. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we've got no memory of it.
Yeah, absolutely. The 100. That's what Rashi brings as well. The same as the Ramban. Absolutely. I didn't see about the years. It's interesting. Yes, it's the same phrase. I'm sure that's what the Mashwosh must talk about that as well. I was just going to point out, though, find the Medrash, the next paragraph in the Ramban of Medrash Rabbi Seinu. In the Medrash, it says, "B'sipri yimei Yishmael to omet tamim rabim." There are lots of different reasons into why it describes this question. Why it tells us the Yemei Yishmael, I think it means the days or the years of Yishmael. V'hanochain, or maybe it could mean that it talks about what the discussion about what happened to his children. Sure, why are we interested in Yishmael effectively? V'hanochain shebohem, and the correct one, says the Ramban, is shechoyat tzadik bal tshuva. He was the righteous and a bal tshuva, the sipa b'gederach tzadikim, and therefore it talks about him the way it talks about tzadikim.
We've all got a chance.
Yeah. So one of the great mysteries, we finish off the life of Yishmael, very different to how we began with Yishmael. It was Baal Tshuva. And he's a Baal Tshuva, and a Baal Tshuva is a Baal Tshuva. Have a good Shabbos. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Okay.